a hit and I will kill my poor Julia. I can, like, I have to kiss Sahid, of course. So I'm sorry, Julia.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Webtoon Wave. I'm your host, Audrey, and I have a really awesome guest today. She is the creator of Hooky and Marionetta on Webtoon. Please welcome Míriam Bonastre. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
I'm super excited too. I can't wait to get into this and just hear more about you and your process and all of it. I'm so excited. Okay, so let's just get into it. Give us an introduction about you and how you got into making webcomics.
Wow, okay, that's a long story. Yeah, I mean, that's a long story. I've been the artist kid all my life. So since I was a child, I always liked to draw, but not only draw like pictures, but also drawing stories. I have like pseudo comics that I drew when I was like 5 years old. Yeah, they like very, I mean, they're not very, not, the flow of the narration, it's not at all, it doesn't make any sense. But I had that passion in me, like I liked to tell stories from a young age. And I have comics I drew with 5 years old, with 8, 12, with 16, all my life, right? When I was studying in high school, I started drawing like long comics, not professionally, but it was like better done, like with inking, screen tones, like manga screen tones. I sold them in comic conventions as fanzines. Fanzines? Do you pronounce it like this in English? Zines, like zine.
Designs, yeah.
Yeah. So that was when I was between 16 and 18 years old. So that's why when I noticed, like, I really like this because I was making like 200 pages stories, like very long stories.
Wow.
I actually had people who read it, who liked it, who bought my books in the conventions and were like excited about them. So I was so motivated. So, and it's funny because nowadays, some people that come to my signings, they have the book
Oh
from
my gosh.
15 years ago. So it's
That's
great.
amazing.
Yeah. And they're still following me. Like, no, not so many people because I didn't sell that many copies. Like a bit, but not so many. But some people are still following my work, so that's very exciting. Yeah. Um. Yeah. So when I finished high school, I went to Escola Joso in Barcelona, a school focused only on comics.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's so cool because all the teachers work in the industry, like in the American or the European industry of comics. So they're all professionals, and it's everything around this world, like the art, the how to write a plot, dialogues and inking and coloring and digital coloring and everything, how to create characters, everything. And it was so cool. It was so cool because I felt like I was where I had to be. I had so much fun there. Yeah, I worked really hard there. That they make us work really hard. My workflow, like I'm able nowadays to work in Webtoon deadlines because in that school they make us work a lot. And they were always like, yeah, you have to work a lot here because in the real world of comic creation, we have to work a lot. And they were lying at all. So yeah, I was studying there. It was 4 years. And when I was in third year, I I discovered Webtoons. It was in 2014, actually. Yeah, it was in 2014 because my best friend was very into Korean culture, like K-pop, K-dramas, and webtoons. So she introduced me to this world. It was about that time when Webtoon organized their first big contest, worldwide contest, because Webtoon was a small platform still, like not in Korea. In Korea it was very big and famous, but they were trying to like get outside Korea.
Yeah, they're trying to expand. Yeah.
Yeah, so they organized the contest looking for creators around the world, like Western creators. So I decided to participate in that contest. And I feel like I explained this story so many times, but it's funny. I entered the contest with Hooky. During the time the contest was starting, was also I was doing the Inktober, this famous challenge where do you have to draw one ink drawing each day of October. So I was doing the Inktober, and one of the days I drew two twin witches, a boy and a girl, and I fell in love with them. So I kept drawing them during the Inktober, and I decided to use these characters for my story for the contest. Yeah, so it was very organic. Like, it wasn't a story that I had in mind for years. It was something new I created especially for the contest, something I was excited about because I liked to draw these two little siblings. And I entered the contest. I was very excited to enter. You had to, but it was similar to the other contest that they made. Like, you had to enter your story, to post your story on Canvas. And well, that was it. So they didn't choose me. I didn't win at all, any prize. But since I had so much fun posting this webtoon online, and I had readers already following the story of Hooky, I decided to keep doing it, just for fun. While I was still studying on the Escola Joso. Then 2 months after that, Webtoon hired me. They sent me an email, like, "Oh, we like your story a lot. Would you like to work with us?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Of
I would
course
like,
I would.
yeah. So Hockey started like in originals. I think it was in 2015. Yeah, I think. So yeah, that's the story. And I published Hooky for 4 years and a half. I finished it in 2020. In 2020, we published the book version, the
Yeah,
Hooky books, yeah, with HarperCollins.
that's amazing. That is really
Yeah,
amazing.
it was super exciting. And after that, I wanted to keep working for Webtoon because I really liked the platform and the experience. So I started working on Marionetta, my Korean series.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Tell me what was it like turning Hooky from like a webcomic format into like a printed version? How was that process like?
It was a very long and hard one. Yeah, because Harper actually wanted to like make the layouts themselves, but they were not used to working on comics, so the samples they sent me weren't working at all. I'm so picky. So I wanted to do it myself. So I actually did almost all the series myself. I did the layouts, except the third one third of the last book. Except that, yes, all the books were made by me, and also I had to redraw the first 60 pages for the first book. Yeah, because I lost the original files in my old computer. Yeah, it was exhausting. But well, it was during the pandemic, so I had time.
My goodness. That's actually like I would be devastated.
Yeah, it was exhausting and it was hard, but it also was a very learning experience because with Hooky I made the mistake. My readers, my fans would say like, no, no, Hooky's perfect, but I see now that with Hooky I made the mistake that I was sometimes I took too long to draw a scene, or I wrote too many dialogues, like too much of everything, right? So for the book, it was so cool to learn to, how do you say that word? Wait, translate.
You're good.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. So um with Hooky I made the mistake to draw like too much for any scene, or especially to write too many dialogues for a comic.
So the pages were like really cluttered with
Yes,
too
exactly.
many. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and since for the books I had limited space, I learned to summarize for it. So it was a
Interesting.
learning experience because I think that comics, well, webtoons, comics, mangas, whatever, this kind of narrative needs to be a little bit summarized sometimes, especially with the dialogues. Sometimes you have to learn to explain the same thing, but maybe with images instead of text. And so, yeah. Um, Translating the webtoon Hooky to the book Hooky helped me learn that, so it was so
Well, that's good. I mean, I know it wasn't the best way to learn it, but I'm glad it helped you with
yeah. But
it.
I'm happy with the result. I really like how the books turn it out, especially the third book. I mean, the third book it's better than the second one, and the second one is better than the first one. So I'm happy with the result.
Yeah, that's amazing.
No, because I was gonna say that the first years of being a webtoon creator, sometimes it didn't feel like I was a real professional,
Mhm.
because I mean people didn't see webcomics as a real.
Yeah,
So I
especially
feel
back
like
then.
that is changing now, and people see webtoons and webcomics like a career path. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I discovered Webtoon back in 2018, and it isn't like the same anymore. Like there's so many people that like found Webtoons and love them. Like there's a lot of Webtoon creators now. Like I see a lot of like my artist friends wanting to get into webcomics, which is really cool. But I wanted to ask you, so did your art process change from, because I would assume that you were making like standard like comic book
Yeah,
pages.
especially manga. Like
Yeah.
I read manga all my life, so when I drew comics on my own before going to that school, that they were like manga style, like with that kind of many panels per page, the screen tones and everything. Then in the school they teach us more like the American comic style and the European comic style, since it was more realistic for me to work for an European company than drawing superheroes. I started drawing more like Europeanish with more panels per page, bigger pages, more backgrounds and everything. And your question was about if my narration style changed with Webtoon.
Or just like how your art process changed and like your art style.
So that's interesting because when I was studying in Hoso, my characters were very stiff, very detailed and stiff. Teachers always told me that I had skills. My backgrounds were really good already, because I always liked to draw backgrounds. But my characters, since I tried to draw them very anatomically perfect, they were very stiff. And I had another art style, a very simple, very quick, that I used to draw like the thumbnails of the future drawings that I was gonna make, like the outfit or whatever. And a teacher told me that he liked my thumbnail art style better than my final art style. So when I started Hooky, I decided to keep the backgrounds as detailed as I always made them, but the characters, I used my thumbnail style. So the Hooky characters were very like spaghetti looking, not that anatomically correct, but they had more life on them, because it was the style that was natural to me, that came naturally on my hand. And it was also quicker to do for me. And since Webtoon, like everybody knows, the deadlines are deadly. So yeah, I thought that it was going to be easier for me to meet the deadlines with that style. And that's why the characters are very simple and at the beginning. But from there, it had like a big evolution. And nowadays, my art style is not like doodle art style anymore. But I feel like it had a natural evolution because I didn't do anything. I just kept working on webtoons
Hmm.
for all these years. So
Yeah.
it was a natural evolution. Like I didn't study like to improve my art style. I didn't search like, I mean, you always are influenced by what you read and what you see online and the other artists you follow, but I didn't consciously looked for, yeah, for changes. So it was very natural.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you're drawing, like, every day, all
Yeah,
day, like, it's just
yeah.
a natural thing to happen where your art style evolves.
I feel like it's so easy to improve your art when you're drawing comics because you're forced to draw everything, like on all the poses and action and backgrounds and objects and everything. So you're gonna improve no matter what. So yeah.
Would you say you learned more working on your webtoon than you did at school?
Well, it's different because in school it's very focused learn. Like we're gonna learn like an anatomy. We're gonna learn like ink. I think that when you're focused and you are studying to improve, maybe you will improve like in the way you want.
Mhm.
I don't know how to express it. Like it's sometimes I missed that experience. Like I didn't have time all these years to be conscious about my art style or where I want to go with it. It just
Yeah.
kept going, right? So sometimes I missed that. It's different. It's different, but I don't regret it. I like my art style as it is right now. Very, but maybe it's not very polished. It's not. It's very expressive. It's very. I think it's warm and it's expressive, and that works for my stories. But it's true that when I have to draw like a cover or an illustration, I struggle. I don't know how to create illustrations. Like I'm so good at creating paneling and scenes, but like an illustration, a beautiful image, it's so difficult for me because I haven't been practicing for years.
I could imagine, like, focusing on creating a singular illustration versus just normal paneling for your webtoon would be.
It's a very different skill. Like when I think about the paneling, I'm thinking it's almost like cinema. Like you think about the scene, the flow of the scene, the
Yeah.
characters. But if I have to think about my characters posing, it's very difficult.
So, you were creating Hooky for 4 years. What did you learn from that experience, and how did it help you create Marionetta?
So I said that when you draw comics, you will improve your art no matter what. But it's different with the writing because because with Hooky I started for the contest. I did like I thought about the general story, some scenes, the ending, and that's it. And I started like creating the comic. So um there was a lot of improv there. Like week by week I created like I had arcs thought in my head, but I didn't have like the whole story written. So it's so difficult to improve your writing when you're creating a webtoon because you don't have time to stop and think about the character arcs and everything and plan like all the mysteries or all the Easter eggs or you know it's like when you're a writer and you write a book, usually writers draw the first draft and then they read and correct the first draft and then they do it again. But webtoons are not like that. You are creating while you are writing while you are publishing. So when I finished Hooky, I noticed that there were so many things that I should have done differently in the writing aspect of it. Like for example, the ending of Hooky. I mean, I'm happy with it, but I think I could have done it better. For example, the villains, the bad guys of the last battle, let's say, were introduced until that same arc, and they lacked a bit of payoff in that aspect, in the confrontation aspect. So with Marionetta, I tried to plan as much as possible before starting the story. Also, Marionetta have a lot of mystery and more world building. I mean, a lot of details that I had to
Yeah.
think. So I prepared the whole story in advance. Like I have thought about the whole series, like in detail. And then before every season, I think about each episode of the season specifically. Like in this episode will happen this is like with bullet points. And then when I have all that written, I start. But even though I do this, sometimes it's challenging because you start writing and some things change because characters ask you different things because you start knowing them, and I don't know, sometimes the story asks from you something different that you had planned, and it's challenging to fit everything again on your like in your plan. But yeah, I learned that having thought the story um is better for creating stories.
And I bet like when you are initially thinking of the story, like you can't include everything that you want to just because you do have those deadlines and and I'm not sure how the like I'm not sure how the process is working with your editor, but are they like with your editor, what is it like working with them? Are they super involved in helping you write the story? Or are they just kind of giving you tips here and there?
Well, I had a different editor with Hooky and with Marionetta. With Hooky, they just let me do whatever I wanted. I think that the company wasn't, I mean, I don't know if it was the company or whatever, but they didn't ask me how many episodes
Mhm.
a Hooky would be, or they didn't ask me anything. They didn't. They just let me do whatever. But nowadays, I feel like it's everything much more organized. My editor for Marionetta, she's the best. I love her so much, and yeah, we talk every day about our life, but also about Marionetta, and she helps me a lot. Like when I have to think about names for cities or for characters, or I'm doubting about some character interaction. I discuss it with her, like, what do you think? It's better like this or like this? And she has so many good ideas. So we talk a lot. And then week by week, what I do is I draw the thumbnails of the episode, like with the dialogues and everything. A very ugly and dirty thumbnail. So I'm not sure how she understands it, but she does.
Yeah.
And then she like gives me feedback of the whole episode. Um, and it's so sweet because she doesn't just tell me that I'll change this. She also tells me that, oh, I love this scene, I love this character, I love this channel. So it's so cool. She helps me a lot. She's not like it's not an obligation to change something when she tells me. She just suggests it and I do whatever. But usually her suggestions are so on tune with my style. So yeah, it's so cool to work with her.
That's great. How did you come up with the story for Marionetta?
So with Hooky, it was like very organic. Like I am excited about these characters. Let's drop something. With Marionetta was very different. It was a story I had planned since I was an emo teenager.
Uh,
Like yeah, but the story changed a lot through the years. It's a typical story I wanted to draw and to write for years, but it changed a lot. Like very much everything. The only thing that it's still on the story, it's like a circus with the people. That's it. But all the main character or any character actually. Maybe I think the only character that was originally there it's Tony. It's the only one. But Julia wasn't there, Shahid wasn't there, Raina wasn't there, Kami wasn't there, anyone. And the contracts weren't there. The country wasn't there. It was in Spain. It was set. It was in real life Spain. But the magic system wasn't there, so it changed a lot. And the inspiration is a mix of me listening to My Chemical Romance, Full Metal Alchemist.
oh, I love Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite mangas. A lot of things that I read like later in life, like as a teenager or young adult, because Cookie was inspired by the things I read as a kid or young teenager. So it's still magic, but it's more edgy. I don't know. I mean, I know, but it has been a long process, so it's hard to summarize. But yeah, it's a story that has been there for so long.
I could imagine that it would change a lot over the years. Was Marionetta always the next thing that you wanted to do, or did you have, like, several different story ideas?
Yeah, I had two ideas and actually did pitch for the two of them, and I pitched them to Webtoon. They liked both, and they let me choose. So I probably will do the other one after Marionetta. But the other one, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a short story, more similar to Hooky because the characters are younger, like 14 years old. It's also fantasy, of course. I want to draw that story as well. But yeah, I had two stories on mine. And actually, it's interesting because the other story, it's way easier to write and draw. And I was a bit overwhelmed at the beginning with Marionetta. Because I was reading Brandon Sanderson's the Stormlight Archive series, and I was like amazed with his magic systems and the world building and everything. So I was so excited to create a world building and magic system for Marionetta and also all the mysteries. So it was challenging and I was scared, but I'm so happy to have chosen Marionetta. Yeah, because I'm having so much fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see all of the passion and love that you have. I mean, for both of them, obviously, like, but you know, as I read Marionetta, I'm just like, I can tell like just how much you love creating it.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And also, I know this is one of the last questions, but well, also one of the things I enjoy the most on Webtoon is like sharing the passion with the readers because I don't know, it's so exciting to see that I'm so excited about my story and there's other people from around the world who are also excited about my story and we share the same excitement. It's so cool.
I've read the comments and just people absolutely adore you and they adore Hooky and Marionetta. And honestly, like when I've read other web comics on Webtoon, like Marionetta is just so unique. Like the magic system you created, the characters, like your art style, it's like really refreshing to read.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you.
The thing that always stood out to me about reading Marionetta was just how amazing you are at drawing like the environments and like the backgrounds and just the scene around the characters. Like there's so much detail that goes into it. So how do you balance meeting deadlines with all of the details and like, amount of work that goes into producing it?
Yeah. Well, with Cookie, I did everything by myself, like everything. But with Marionette, I was like, okay, I'm older now. I'm tired. So I have Aiden, who is my colorist, and he colors everything, and he's fantastic because
That's awesome.
I write the episode, I do all the editing thing with my Mariah. I'm sorry, Mariah, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. In my mind, I say
Maria
Mireia.
Mariah.
Yeah, whatever. But and then I write, I draw, and then I send the line art to Aiden, and he colors everything perfectly, and it's amazing.
That's awesome.
So that helped a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also true that since I have now a colorist, I tend to draw longer episodes and
Mhm.
much more detail than I did in Hooky. Because since I
Yeah.
have more time, I I use all the time I have to draw like details and outfits. But I have so much fun. The only thing I don't like to draw, it's like crowds of people. I hate that. I really hate that. But I like to draw backgrounds. That's cool because there's a lot of artists that are scared of drawing backgrounds, and I understand it because drawing characters it's always more fun, right? They are live, they're interacting. But for me, it's important because it adds to the story. I don't know. It's like it's another character. The background itself it tells a story as well, and it helps you to enter the scene and feel like you're there. So it's very important to me, and I have fun. So
I mean, like I was so impressed when I first started reading it because I was like, I am one of those artists that I hate drawing backgrounds and I just don't have the time to figure out like perspective and putting it all together. I'd much rather just buy the backgrounds and pose them.
Yeah, but you have I have to say something. The secret for doing perspective is learning to do it and then ignore it and then ignore it. I mean, I don't, when I draw the backgrounds, I do it like, oh, because I don't like to draw like perfectly straight lines like a city. That's why my backgrounds always are like full of nature and plants and textiles, because I don't like to draw like straight lines. It's so boring to me. But I understand why it's scary to draw backgrounds, because I mean, it's like so different and it's maybe less exciting. I understand it. Yeah.
But I mean, like, as from an artist perspective, I respect it. Like, I really respect that you draw your own backgrounds. It's very impressive to me.
Okay, thank you.
And you do it so well too. Like, I could see like adding all of like the natural stuff in the background makes it easier, so you're not worrying so much about those perfectly straight lines,
Yeah,
which, would be that's like my nightmare, honestly.
yeah, yeah, I understand it. Yeah.
But yeah, they're amazing. And do you enjoy drawing backgrounds more than the characters?
No, 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 no. Drawing characters is always so fun. Yeah. I like. I mean, I like both, but drawing characters, I don't know. They're alive. They're interacting. They're people. Of course. I mean, except background characters. I hate those. but but yeah, I prefer drawing characters. Yeah.
So when you're storyboarding and that initial process of like sketching and then sending it to your editor to look over, how do you plan out a scene? Like I have a lot of either beginner webcomic artists or like more experienced creators, whoever, that ask me like how to improve like the visual storytelling and like how to show like what's happening in a scene really well and like character emotion. How do you think about drawing those out as you're creating your episodes?
Difficult. Yeah, it's difficult to put it in words, because I feel like it's very natural. It helps like reading a lot of comics and also watching movies. Like watching good movies helps a lot, because it's very similar to the cinema narrative. So I don't know. I tend to imagine the scene like not like a movie. It's the more fun and easiest part
Mhm.
to draw a comic. Like I like to write. I like to draw. I like to color, but not that much.
Yeah.
Making the storyboard, it's so fun to me. It comes naturally, because it's when the story comes to alive. I guess I try to change the point of view a lot. If you know a little bit of cinematography, like cinema.
Yeah. Like how they position the camera, like angles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The camera angles and what they mean. Like
Mhm.
if this perspective means that the character feels scared or tiny or less, this one feels like he's powerful. Or maybe if we see them very far away and we don't see their faces, it feels like cold. Or knowing all these kind of rules really helps. But I feel like knowing them helps, but also, as I said, reading a lot of comics, watching movies, and absorbing the storytelling of other creators. It should come naturally. I also try to avoid, because I've seen creators that maybe are so good at writing and are so good at coloring and are so good at drawing, but they make a huge mistake, in my opinion, that it is making the same panel, not exactly the same, but when two characters talk, it's always like
With
um
the same angle.
same
Yeah.
angle, like without background, like this, without moving much. Um, that's that makes it boring. That and I always try to have that in mind, that I don't want to to draw a boring scene. Even if it's a conversation between two characters, I try to change the camera angles and everything to make it dynamic.
a lot of people can learn by just observing what other people do. If they want to be a better webcomic artist, like just read webcomics, see what
Mm,
other artists are doing, and
mm,
kind of study, like, if you like a panel, like maybe you could kind of figure out why the angle works or why the color scheme works. Um, especially like cinematography, like it's like you're capturing a scene and you have different angles, and depending on what a character is feeling or what's happening in the scene, like cinema is a really great way to kind of learn how to do it more effectively.
yeah. Also, it can be tricky because there's good movies with good cinematography, but there's also bad movies. So maybe for a beginner it's difficult to differentiate, but yeah, watch good movies.
Yeah. Yeah, if anyone listening is curious, like just even look up some of the best rated
Mm.
movies and
Yeah.
see what they're doing.
So see the yeah, to see directors that maybe try different things and experiment with this kind of camera angles and visuals, it's so interesting that then I mean it's more interesting than the boring face to face.
Yeah. Yeah, it can get like boring if it's just their faces like the
Mm.
entire time. Like they call it talking heads
Yeah,
essentially. So
yeah,
people who like any artist, like if you're wondering how to create a more interesting scene, like you could even do so in film, they call them B-roll shots where like maybe a character is talking or maybe they're even establishing a scene, but you could have like you don't have to have their faces when they're talking. Like you could show like maybe if a character is feeling conflicted, it could be like a close up of their hand and they have clenched
yeah,
hands. It could be like if a character is moving in action, you could show it like a tilted angle
yeah, yeah,
that creates movement. There's also like they call it a Dutch angle where the screen is tilted. Generally, it creates like a scene of tension and
yeah,
like if they're in a scary situation, you could shrink the character and make them seem small because they're experiencing this terrified emotion or they're in like a scary situation. That's a really good way to do it.
I'll try to do different things. I try to experiment. So it's yeah. I think maybe at the beginning it's like you have to force yourself to experiment
Hmm.
because
Yeah. So with Hooky, you have the published volumes of it, but you also created a coloring book with Scholastic, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
how was that experience?
Well, it wasn't that much work because I had a lot of illustrations of Hooky I did through the years, like covers or illustrations for Instagram, like Merry Christmas or things like that, random things. So I just used all this content I had. So it was easy, but it's so cool seeing the coloring book because even if I colored all the illustrations, I really want to color them again. So yeah, it was great. Actually, it has been launched in United States, but next week it will be available in Spain at last.
Oh my
So I'm
gosh,
so happy.
yay!
Yeah. In 2 weeks I have a presentation. Next week or in 2 weeks? Well, I have a presentation, so I'm excited about it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. But it was easiest. I mean it was way easier than the
Yeah, oh
coloring
yeah,
book.
a lot less time consuming.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, was it Webtoon that was like, "Hey, we wanna make this happen for you," or did Scholastic kind of reach out to Webtoon and were like, "Hey, we love Hooky, we wanna turn it into a coloring book?"
Well, in this case it was I don't know. I'm not sure. Webtoon was the one who told me, but I don't know if Scholastic was the one who reached out. I'm not sure. Like most of the opportunities with Hooky and Marionetta come through Webtoon. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes someone tells me personally, but yeah, it's mainly Webtoon who like moves the
Yeah,
project
yeah.
around, seeks opportunity.
Yeah, okay, I have a couple questions left before we get into our fan-submitted questions. I did wanna ask you, what are some things that you would have done differently in the beginning? Maybe with Hooky or even maybe with Marionetta? Like, are there things that you wish you would have done differently?
I mean, I'm thinking about Marionetta because with Hooky, I have one thing I know I thought I would have done differently, but I'm thinking also about Marionetta. No, I'm happy with Marionetta. So,
Okay.
yeah, because it's my current story, so it feels like I'm doing it right now. So I'm happy with it now.
Yeah.
I don't know in the future, but
No, it's fine.
so with Hooky, there's only one thing, and it's the fact that maybe at the beginning, I was so worried about the comments of people,
Mhm.
so it affected my story a little bit because, well, when you publish on Webtoon, you get a lot of comments, like a lot, and there's a lot of opinions. And also, since it's a work in progress, people tend to leave the comment based on the current episode. Of course, it makes sense. So they hated Nico and Monica, two of the
Aw.
main characters, because they were so mean to Dorian. And my intent with these characters was to have them being mean and then have a character arc and slowly becoming friends with Dorian and being nicer and becoming better people and yeah, a character arc. But I got stressed about people hating on them too much, so I accelerated their arc and they became nicer sooner than I expected than I planned. So that was a learning experience also because nowadays I try to not be influenced at all by the comments. I think that's important because um it's similar as what I told you before about having all the story right before starting. Then sometimes the characters ask you different things. So with the commenters, it's even worse. Like if you have your story thought of and the comments affect your story, it can be a mess in the end. Like so, I have to keep my mind cool and yeah, and I try to stick to my original idea.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that I don't listen to reviews or critics. Sometimes I read opinions that I think like this person is right. Maybe mm, I didn't explain this correctly, or this the meaning of this scene can be read as something that I didn't intend to. Consider these critiques like as things I can better in the future, but not like
I mean, it's hard when you put your work out into the world and people are free to comment on it or give their opinions. Like, it's hard when you attract so many different opinions and people can be really negative about it too. Like, they can be very critical.
I feel like having so many people hating on you on webtoons, it's not that common because people who go to webtoon to read to take the time to read your story will usually appreciate your story and your art. So
Yeah.
maybe you have, I mean, when it's a hater, a troll, it's so stupid. I just laugh like it's silly. You can see when someone is just hating and it's just stupid. You can choose your path.
Yeah, exactly.
In my case, it's difficult because sometimes I read reviews about my webtoon that I'm like, oh, this person and I just don't click. But sometimes I read others that are like, oh, this person is right. So you can, I don't know, there's critics that are fair and they work with you, like they help you learn, and others that it just that like for example if someone critiqued my stories because they don't like that they're like very character focused and it's like it doesn't have action or it has too much romance and everything. I will like, well, it's your taste, it's your opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point. So our last question before we get into our fan submitted questions, what advice would you give somebody who wants to create a webcomic?
Ooh, okay, advice.
Mhm.
prefer to work a lot. I don't know. I feel like during the interview, I told you basically the things that are important to me. Like choose an art style that you can do fast, and you can, well, that you can keep the deadlines on time. Like to try to be too perfectionist, to draw too many details if you know that it will take so much time for you to finish. So choose an art style that works, and a coloring style that it's not that difficult, because we're focusing on Webtoon here, okay? So I think the most challenging thing on Webtoon is the deadlines, at least for me. Then having everything written before starting to actually draw the story is very helpful, because when you start publishing, you will not have time to stop and think. I think that it's very important also to draw a story that you enjoy drawing and writing, because so many times I see people that are like, "Oh, what story do you prefer to read? This one or this one? What kind of things do people like more?" I see this in forums or on Reddit or places like that, where people like look for tips. And I think that the most important thing is that you're having fun with your story, and it's that you wanna tell people a story you wanna tell. So yeah, I think, yeah, these three
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, I mean, it would like you if somebody doesn't enjoy their story, like then what's the point of
Yeah.
creating it?
But some people want to please the audience because they think they will have like more success like this. And I think that that doesn't work. But because drawing a comic, it's so much work, so you have to enjoy it while you're doing it. So yeah.
I think as webcomic creators, like especially us independent ones, like it's hard to like you want people to enjoy your story, but at the same time, like you can't just create a story based around what you think other people will like. Because then, like, at some point, you'll just be less motivated to create it, especially if it's not received well. Like, if you plan, oh, I'm gonna include all these tropes and characters that I think people will like, then, like, what's the point of doing
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly.
And I think a huge thing that other creators tell me all the time when I ask them this question is they're like, just do it, just start making it.
Yeah, that's so important. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the most important of them. Yeah, just do it. Yeah.
To anybody listening who is thinking of creating a webcomic, like you're not going to learn unless you just start doing it. So take time, figure out your story. You don't have to have every single story beat figured out, but have the beginning and the ending and maybe like those major arcs
Mm,
figured out
mm.
and then just start doing it. And you can learn a lot by, you know, reading other webcomics. There's plenty of resources online to like how to be a good storyteller and like pacing. Like there's a lot of resources online, but I think the big thing is you won't learn unless you just start doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like you can learn a lot like reading and studying, but actually making a comic
Yeah,
is the biggest learning experience of them all.
exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into our fan submitted questions. I'm so excited. I had so many people submit
Hey,
questions
thank you.
and a lot of them were like plot related, so I had to like exclude those just because we don't want
Okay.
to spoil Hooky or
Like
Marionetta.
they were asking for spoilers
Yeah,
or
they're asking for
oh,
spoilers, which I think is funny. You know, it's like okay. So our first question, Coral like the Reef asked regarding Camille and Julia. Can you share more on their dynamic and how they're changing?
okay. So Camila and Julia are childhood friends. You've read the first season, right? Well, their main dynamic, the main conflict is that they're growing in separate ways. They live in Calgary. It's a very fascist country. And Julia is very patriotic and very like
Her
a good
dad's in the
citizen.
military. Yeah,
Yeah, while Camille wants to break free and she doesn't want to marry anyone. She wants to experience adventures, so they're growing very differently, right? And while they love each other, Camille is like, Julia only has Camille as a friend. Well, they only have each other as best friends. So Julia is very dependent on Camille. She wants to keep her to herself, like, don't go with anyone else, be with me, you're my only friend. She's very possessive of her friend, while Camille, she needs to breathe. She loves Julia, she wants to spend time with Julia, but she also wants to meet other people, to live new experiences. She feels a bit constrained by her friends, so it's a very difficult conflict for them because they want opposite things. Also, they have toxic traits, each of them. Like, Julia is very possessive and jealous, and she asks too much of Camille, and Camille is very dismissive of Julia sometimes, and she forgets about her, and she doesn't care about her that much sometimes. So yeah, they have this big conflict. And this was a very interesting plot point for me because it's based on myself and my female friendships, relationships through my life. Because especially in my teenage years and as a young adult, I've been Julia, but I also been Camille. So I understand both sides, and I had to learn to be a better friend. So I wanted to write that. I think it's interesting to explore female friendships
Mhm.
because I don't know, it was so interesting to explore that. I don't want to give more spoilers because um you'll see, because the question you said, how is it changing? They're trying to fix the relationship and find new ways to be friends. It's true that right now in the story they're focusing on another big plot points and dangers, and maybe their friendship seems healed right now. They're trying, but yeah, it was so interesting to write them.
I think that's like a really good storytelling tip. You know, when people are trying to figure out their characters and like relationships between characters, modeling them after like your real life experiences is a good way to go because it adds like realism to your characters. They feel like actual people that could exist, right? Like you're giving them more like life essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like I do this without knowing it. Like, I notice afterwards. Like, I write the story, I write my characters, and afterwards I'm like, that's literally me. But it's because it was the themes and the struggles are interesting to me. Maybe because I lived them, because I experienced it myself. Maybe because I learned from. But I don't do it on purpose. Like, it's it's not like a conscious decision. Like, I'm gonna do this after my experience. Like, I draw and I write, and I'm like, yeah, that was me.
Okay, so our next question, Curry asked, what inspired your character designs? Also, please tell her I love her stories so much. They're my favorite to read. She's such an inspiration, and I will be a lifelong fan.
Oh, that's so cute. Thank you. Thank you. If anything in particular inspired them, if I'm being honest, I don't know. I just like the circus aesthetic, and I wanted to draw a lot of circus outfits. I don't know. I mean, I know that sometimes my characters remind people of other famous characters, but I don't do it that on, I don't do that on purpose either. Like, for example, so many people told me that, I mean, the circus itself reminds you of the house moving castle. And yeah, I did that on purpose. Like, it was a main inspiration that the circus, like, vehicle, it's similar to house moving castle, and I did that on purpose. But what I didn't do on purpose was the fact that Julia looks like Sophie. That wasn't on purpose at all. Yeah, and Sahid maybe how not that much, maybe only the cape and everything. But I don't know. I feel like if I get inspired on something specific, it's not on purpose. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, I think like you did a really good job at creating their characters based on their personalities, like their physical traits really embody like the kind of people they are.
I tried to draw like a more diverse cast in the sense of age shapes and lips and heights, body types. Maybe I'm trying. I'm still bad at it because in Hooky everyone was more similar. That I think I suffered from same face syndrome a little bit more in Hooky. So in Marietta, I try to better that aspect of my art, and I will try. I will keep trying to improve that because drawing different characters, it's always better.
Um, okay, so our next question. Bruins asked, what is her creative process for writing and world building and any tips for storytelling?
About world building, my starting point was the 1950s Spain, but I decided to make a fantasy world instead because it's more interesting to me. I like fantasy, and I could like play with the story of the country more if it wasn't Spain.
Mhm.
I don't know. I did a lot of research for that. And I'm trying to be better at world building because with Hooky, the world building was non-existent. It just was like a magical world with characters from fairy tales sometimes and sometimes not. But with Merida, I'm trying to build like a country around, like it has their own like story, ancient story that affects the main story and the wars with a neighbor country. So I try to make it make sense. That's my main focus. Yeah, and process for writing. Well, I covered that already. It's like I start from the big picture. Like I have all the series planned. Like maybe not super detailed, but I have the ending and a lot of plot points and a lot of character arcs planned. And then before starting each season, I plan each episode like with bullet points. That's it. Yes, something that helped me a lot. It's something that my editor did, and it was making a chart with every character's arc. Like, okay, this character will start here in this season and will end here in this season. Like, because they need to have an arc and every one of themselves, and it has to be an arc that fits the main theme of the story and fits the character. So it helped a lot to I mean, I'm being very organized lately. I'm enjoying being organized. To write complex stories, it's helpful. And yeah, I don't know. That's it, I
No, that
think.
makes sense. Yeah, that's definitely helpful. Like mapping out like characters and their arcs, I think is super
Yeah,
helpful.
I feel the more complex it's your story, the more you need to do that. Maybe for my next story, it's more simple. It has less characters. It doesn't have world building at all, so it will be easier for me. So it depends the kind of story you're telling. Yeah, but I need to be very organized with this one.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely helps.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question. Olive Co asked, does drawing the details ever kill you?
Yeah, well, yes, I told you the thing I hate the most is having crowds of people. They're
Mhm.
like horrible.
Especially those circus scenes with all of
Yeah.
the people watching.
I mean, circus scene, it's not that bad because I have all my circus members designed, so I know who to draw. But if it's a random crowd of visitors in the circus or wherever, it's so painful because I have to think about people who doesn't matter and outfits, and I don't like it. I don't like that. Yeah, and that's it, I think, because drawing details on clothes of the main characters or details on the background, it's funny to me.
Okay. Okay, so our next question, Raiku asked, what was the process in making your characters?
Yeah, like I guess it means writing them because, yeah, I feel like it depends on the character. Like, so many of them changed a lot from the first idea I had of them and the last one. This is something I explained in another interview I did a while ago. But for example, Sahid was gonna be white,
Hmm.
gay, and emo. I mean,
Wow.
his personality was so different. He was another race. He was completely gay, so it was a very different character. So he changed a lot. He still is a bit emo with
Yeah, a
the
little
dark
bit.
side, but he is more flirty now, and yeah. So it's not emo, but and Julia, for example, wasn't even from this story, and Camille and Julia actually were from the other story. The main character in Marionetta was Amalia, the crazy lady from the military. The main villain was going to be the main character originally, but with her personality as it is right now, like it was a horrible main character, like horrible in the sense that she was so bad. She was like an anti-hero, but I it was different from Hooky. Hooky started with the characters as they were, and with Marionetta, I created my characters and I slowly make them fit the story better. You know, like Sahid didn't work as I started writing and changing things. Sahid didn't work as an emo, depressed emo. He needed to have more energy to him. The main character being Amalia didn't work at all because I thought about the webtoon audience and they were gonna have a hard time following someone like Amalia. And I mean, understandable. I still love her, but she's so bad. Julia has a lot of flaws at the beginning. She's a very flawed character, but I feel like she has some characteristics that people can relate to because she's a good girl, right? She's like a goody two shoes in a fascist world,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
So in even if you're not a fascist, you can understand the desire to be good, to be a good girl for your dad, for your teachers, to do the things as you're told. So many people have felt like this, so it's Juliet easier to relate to. And it's also an interesting character because she have all these very wrong ideas that need to be changed. So yeah, I think I created them based on what I needed for the story. But once I had them created, they started walking by themselves, and they changed it. There's things that changed with time while I was drawing and writing. And at some point, it always happens to me that I see them as real people, like they talk to me. I mean, not like I'm crazy, but they ask things that they need for their characters. So yeah, that's the process. Right now, they're my children. I understand them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, our next question. Jesse Pantine asked, "Do you think art or storytelling is more important to focus on for beginners?"
Both. I think yeah, for beginners, I think art can attract readers to you, but it's the writing who will
That will
make
make
them
them stick
stay.
around. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe writing's more important. I think it is. Yeah, but both things are important in the comic because it's a very visual art. So people need to like the art. Well, I don't know. Yeah, they're very similar in importance, but maybe it's more important to know how to write a good story, a good engaging story. Yeah, and people, yeah, your art will improve automatically, as I say. Yeah,
I get that question sometimes, and I always tell them to focus on the storytelling aspect the most.
yeah,
And, if they're worried about the art aspect, like, there's plenty of webcomics that I read that are like, they're not professionals, like, they're,
yeah,
I mean, kind of beginners, and the story keeps me around.
yeah,
And I think generally my advice for beginners is make the thumbnail, like the series thumbnail, really eye-catching, and then make your episode thumbnails eye-catching and intriguing as well, because that will get people to click in. And then, the art will attract them. The story, like the synopsis for your story will attract them, but the story itself is what's going to have them keep coming back. And generally, what I also say is to not that like every episode has to end on like a major cliffhanger, but leave it off where it builds intrigue and interest for the next episode. Because they'll want to come back and
Absolutely.
because they'll have this question like, oh, what is this? What's going to happen with this character? What's going to happen
Yeah.
next? So,
I mean, the cliffhanger thing, I think it's so important on Webtoon, like
mhm.
very important. I think since I've been working Webtoon for so many years, I do it automatically already.
Yeah,
Like it's natural to me.
yeah.
And also another thing that I think when I start reading a webcomic and it starts with a huge like exposition
Oh, like a
scene
backstory
with
to like the world, and
oh I hate that.
I don't like
I
it
hate that.
either.
I automatically close the window. I don't like that. So don't start your comic with um
Like
explaining
explaining
the
the
whole
world.
yeah.
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 That's
No, no,
definitely a
no.
turn off. Like, I just want to get
Yeah.
into the story and I want to know who the main characters are and like what to
Exactly.
expect. I don't want a
Yeah.
backstory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The first thing is your or choose one of these. Maybe your main character, or start your comic in the middle of a scene, maybe in the middle of an interesting scene.
Hmm.
Even if it's not your character, that also works, but not explaining the background, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the worst.
Too much exposition at the start. Like, so many fantasy manhwas are doing that and it drives me crazy.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
just
no,
want to
no.
know who the characters are and like get
Yeah,
into it, and when all it is so much exposition, and like the art for the exposition, like doing that is always the same. Like
really.
really ornate, but it's also like kind of the same like faceless characters and like
Mm.
simplified. Does that make sense?
Yes, 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 yes. I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah. No, no. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. So that's good advice, definitely. Okay, so our last question, Nodia Sanguino asked, Kiss Mary Kill. Mary Kill with Julia, Said, and Tony.
Oh no. I mean, personally, I mean, it's wiser to marry Tony. I mean, he's marriage material.
Yeah.
Sahid is not. I'm
No.
sorry, Sahid. I love Sahid. I really love him, but he's not marriage material, I think. So yes, I would marry Tony. Yeah, surprisingly. I would kiss Sahid and I will kill my poor Julia. Oh my god. Because I can like I have to kiss Sahid, of course. So I'm sorry, Julia. Yeah.
I think most of our readers would do the same.
Yeah. It's wise. It what makes sense. So
Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah, when she had, I think she sent that question in and I was just giggling. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to include this."
yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, it's the first time someone asked me this.
So that's
So,
great.
yeah.
That's so funny. Um, okay, that is it for our fan questions. Thank you, Miriam, for appearing on the podcast. It was so fun to talk to you and get into your process and how you got into webcomics. And I know a lot of people will benefit from all of your advice and tips. And thank you for coming on and sharing it all.
Well, thank you. I had so much fun. I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, it was great. It was
I
great.
had so much fun. I loved the questions, your questions, and the fun questions as well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So, where can people find you online?
On Instagram only because I left Twitter forever. And I'm very healthy right now thanks to it. Yeah, on Instagram, my Instagram is Míriam Bonastre, like it sounds, and I'm there posting mainly about Marionetta and Hooky.
And you can go buy her volumes of Hooky. You can go read Hooky and Marionetta on Webtoon. She has her coloring book.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and it was a pleasure to have you.
thank you.
If you found this episode entertaining or informative, give us a follow. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at the Webtoon Wave. You can listen to us on Spotify at The Webtoon Wave, follow our Instagram at The Webtoon Wave to stay updated on future guests and exciting news. We have plenty of really awesome guests in our lineup. So stay creative, stay inspired, and we'll see you next time.